I'm Saul Kirsch with Double Alpha Academy, and today I'd like to show you an experiment or a speed test run with our new Double Alpha PrimaFill device. Now, this device is designed to fill large and small primer tubes, and I want to show you its efficiency and also discuss a few tricks and tips that you can use to improve the function if you find that with your particular primers they're not running down the exit hole as smoothly or as quickly as you would like. The reality is that all primers are different. They have different radiuses on the backside of their cup. They are more or less slick. Some of them have a center of gravity that seems to be slightly differently located, and they all behave slightly differently when you vibrate them and try and make them slide down and exit through a hole. But the nice thing about the PrimaFill device is that it's a handheld device, which means that you can adjust the way you're holding it to best suit the performance and maximize the output rate with the type of primers that you're using. In some cases, you might find that holding it more at an angle or tilting it more to the side will allow those primers to run down quicker for your brand of primers. Or changing the type of vibration that the motor is creating by holding the device with one hand or having both hands on it, or perhaps slightly touching it on the edge of a table as you're running it, that greatly changes the vibration that's going through the device and will change the efficiency at which the primers are outputting. One other thing that you need to be aware of and you need to adjust for occasionally, if your primer tube's chamfering on the top is not perfect or not completely centered, you might find that once you seat the tube, the primers are not running properly, but if you apply a little bit of pressure on the bottom of the tube, either one way or the other, that hole gets perfectly aligned and then the primers run out completely smoothly. So while you're learning to use the device with your brand of primers, experiment with how you hold it. What angle you're holding it at, what angle you're tilting it towards you and sideways towards your exit hole. How you're allowing it to vibrate by holding it with one hand or both hands on the device, or possibly even allowing it to touch on the edge of a table as you run it. And finally, make sure your tubes are as clean as possible on the entrance hole, and in some cases you might want to tilt them just ever so slightly as you allow the primers to run. These are small adjustments that you can make on the fly as you use the device and make it work perfectly for your particular brand of primers. Now, when it's running well, this device is hugely efficient. And what I want to show you here is a little speed test that we're going to do. We're going to fill 1,000 primers. We're going to load 9 tubes of small primers and 1 tube of large primers. I have a mixed assortment of primers here. We've got some Federal primers. We've got 2 types of Winchester small pistol, small rifle. We've got Fiocchi primers, small rifle. We've got CCI small primers. We've got the Russian Maroon primers, CCI for rifle, and then we've got SMB for rifle and for pistol, both of them small. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run a speed test in one take. I'm going to feed 10 tubes of primers, small, 9 small, 1 large, and while I'm doing that, if I run into an issue with one type of primer or another, I'll discuss what I'm doing to get it running, and we'll get through the primers and see how long it takes us. So let's start our stopwatch. And let's run this test. First up, SMB. You want to flip them with short, sharp motions. Get them all the right way up. If you have 1 or 2 left over stuck in the corner, sometimes it might be quicker just to grab those manually and flip them as with any primer. Great. I'm going to seat my tube and get started on the first grab. Now, these are running pretty good. You can see I change the angle a little bit as I go. I don't let them pile up over the exit hole. I want to keep them away from the hole until I gradually feed them in. And there's our first primer tube is filled. We'll put our cap on it and move on to another SMB. These are pistol. The previous ones were rifle. Well, you can see that if I touch on the table, vibration changes. These feed very well either way, but I'm tilting it a little bit more than I would with some of the other brands. And there's another tube filled. Let's move on to some CCIs. These are small rifle CCIs. Couple there, one there that's right in the middle of the pack. There we go. CCI. These are nice and smooth, very quick to exit, as is often the case with silver primers. Now, if occasionally you get one stuck, tapping on the lid will usually break that free. And there's our primer tube full. Next up are the Russian primers, and I know these have a very round profile on the bottom of the primers, and they can be a little tricky to handle. So let's see how these feed out for us. I can see I left a couple that were not flipped. There's one that's not flipped. That'll make its way out, but will be more tricky. Now, putting both hands on the device for these primers does seem to make them run a little better. But as you can see, the roundness of the profile of the primers does make them a little more tricky than you would like. I fed one the wrong way because I hadn't flipped it. But we got that done as well. The round profile of those primers do make them a little more tricky to handle. Let's go on to some CCI primers again. Sometimes when you get a primer up against the lid, it's a little difficult to flip. Again, silver primers, these will run most likely a little faster. I got one that doesn't want to go there. Very rarely will you have one that actually settles in the wrong angle, and you may have to pop the lid to clear it, but it would be a rare occurrence. And there we go. That's so far 500 primers, and we're still under 5 minutes. Let's do some Fiocchis. Now this is 150, so I'm going to feed out just 2/3 of this case. That's about there. Hopefully I didn't go over. Now these primers do feed well, but they tend to be a little sticky, which does make them slide a little slower than some, but still should not be much of an issue for the primer fill. I can tell they're falling down the tube just a little slower than some of the others. Again, here's one that just doesn't want to go. It's got itself wedged in at an angle. That's what you don't want to do, is you never want to activate the device, of course, with the lid open, because you will lose your primers. So I'm going to just flip those ones again. I'm touching the device on the edge of the table, which makes the vibration a little sharper, and the sticky primers then run a lot better. And there we are. Winchester. these occasionally are a little tacky as well. These are the small rifle. Now you don't want to let them pile up over the exit hole. You want to gradually bring them towards the exit hole. And touching it on the table sharpens up the vibration a little bit and make sure that they run. Now I'm going to lean on the pipe just a little, straighten it out a little bit at the bottom, and that helps these primers run down this tube. Possibly the chamfer on the top of this tube is not perfect, so by touching the tube on the side, I was able to get those to run a lot cleaner. Before we continue with the rifle, let's just switch over to do some large primer. You can see all I need to do is move that magnetic stopper. These primers, I'm not even sure what brand they are, I've misplaced the box, but these are large primers, as you can see. As always, large primers tend to be a little finicky in flipping. Oh, there we have it. And of course, since we're loading large primers, we'll use a large primer tube and the opposite side hole. Principles are the same. You don't want to let the primers pile up over the exit hole. Oh, I got one of them lodged in there. A little bit sideways. And there we have our large primer tube filled. And we'll go straight on to another box. These are small pistol of Winchester. We're going to move our plate across, of course, because we're going back to small primers. You can see how simple and easy that is to do. Now we're ready again to go small primers. Another tube. Give it a little bit more vibration, touching on the table. Make sure they keep running. Winchester primers, more than any, tend to be a little tacky out the box. And so they are likely to be the ones that sometimes require a little more finessing. And I can see that I've got a couple here which are the wrong way around, so I probably missed them while I was flipping. So I'm going to dislodge, make sure those are flipped the right way. We don't want any upside down primers heading down the tube. And that was tube number 9. We have 900 primers fed, and we will finish with the large box of Federals. And we designed this device so that it would be large enough to allow you to drop primers even from this very large box without an issue onto the tray area. Get in there for these couple that don't want to turn. Okay. And the Federals. Federals are pretty slick. They usually feed really quickly. You can see this is going down as smooth as can be. I got both hands on the device, which dampers a little bit. And there we go. 100 Federal primers are done. And that concludes 1,000 primers. Let's stop the clock. And we are stopping right there at 11 minutes and 20 seconds. So I spent a little bit of time discussing it while I was doing it. You could see that some primer types will feed quicker and easier than others, but even those which are really tacky or round profiles, just by moving the angle a little bit, touching it, occasionally having to tap on top of the box to make sure that they keep running, there's no issue actually feeding any brand of primers down. And I've got my 10 primer tubes here ready to go. 9 of them small primers, 1 of them large primer. And it took me 11.5 minutes, including a little bit of explanation along the way. I'd say roughly a minute a primer tube, especially with the easy primers. You could definitely keep up and do it faster than 1 minute per primer tube. So this is the new Double Alpha Primer Fill, which is available and shipping now from doublealpha.biz.